Go live. There we go.
We're live streaming.
We're live and streaming. We're live on the internet. Thanks so much for checking out our YouTube channel. Leave a comment below, or whatever they say these days.
Don't forget that like and subscribe.
Smash the bell button or whatever. Welcome to our crash course webinar on architecture and modeling. So we've got Joel here today, as usual, and we are going to cover a few things today. So we're going to go over what architecture is, what modeling is, who should be involved in the discussions when you're planning out your architecture and modeling. I'll talk a little bit about field types, how to visualize and kind of map out your content, and go over a couple of basic model builds.
Right on.
As always, it is an AMA, so if you have any questions, drop those. Whoa, getting weird pop-ups on the right here. Make sure you drop those in the comments. We'll be monitoring those as well. And yeah, interrupt us at any time. And I will pass it over to you, Joel.
Well, thanks, Brendan. Hi, everybody. My name is Joel. And the most important thing that you can know to... Wait, Brendan, you look tired. Are you tired?
I'm exhausted.
You want to know why?
Why is that?
Why was the webinar host so tired? Because they had to Zoom all day.
All day.
Yeah. So that was a super funny joke. And but it's the delivery, right? It's the delivery. Anyway, cool. Yeah, this is a great topic. Content modeling is huge. Content modeling really fits under the umbrella of like content strategy, which is a really big, kind of a scary-ish term. So what we're hoping to do is make the content modeling part way less scary and to sort of democratize it. But what's really cool, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on this, but do we have something to announce with regards to content modeling? We
do. So next week, we actually have a course on architecture and modeling that'll be launching in our Agility Academy. So that'll be coming out on March 3rd, which is Monday. A lot of the stuff that we're going to cover here today is going to be related to that, but the course is going to let you like dive a little bit deeper, learn a little bit more, learn some more best practices, test your knowledge a little bit, and get a certification at the end. So this is kind of like a good prerequisite to that course. And if you do want early access to that course, just feel free to reach out, let us know, and we might be able to give you a little early invite and a little early preview of that course before we officially launch it.
Sweet. Well, and so it's a great chance to learn. It's a great chance to for me to kind of bounce some ideas off now, both off you, Brendan, and off some of the folks in the audience. So definitely, if there's something you have a question about, or if you have a comment about, please drop that there, or connect with us on. You can connect with us on Slack, or you can send us emails, and tons of ways to connect with us to give us feedback about content modeling, about our courses. Learn it and teach it is a core value at Agility, and modeling is one of the things that I think we ended up talking about the most, because it's one of the things that can help you future-proof your system, and set it up for success for years to come. But the other reason it's super important is it's the most important aspect of your system with regards to the editor experience. So how you model your content is going to determine the experience of someone who's going to work with that content now and in the future, which is why I recommend it to not just be someone who's a developer, or who's building the system. And that's often what happens, right? A developer will get the design and say, hey, you got to implement this design, model all the content so that it works. And the developer will often model it so that they can build it and code it. But we really want folks to take into account what the editor experience is going to be like after that. That's a really important aspect. Have you encountered that at all, Brendan, in your experience with Agility, where you've seen a good system and one that's maybe not such a good system? Not naming names.
Yeah, you can definitely tell when you look at an instance, you look at the architecture of somebody's site, whether or not there was another core value involved, which is collaboration, making sure that you have the right voices at the table when you're thinking about architecture, when you're thinking about building your models.
Right on. Yeah, so it fits under the model of content strategy. We also call it content architecture as opposed to modeling, but I think modeling is a little more accessible as a term. But one of the other aspects of this that we don't want to talk too much about today, but we will, is security and roles and workflow. But we're going to separate that a little bit from the modeling part right now and just talk about like what are content models. And so in Agility, we have really 3 different kinds of models. Regular content models, you can have component models, and you can have page models. Now, content models and component models are very similar because both of those, really what they do is you can name the model of a thing, which you can also think of a model as a schema, but then you can put fields under that model. And that's really the idea. And if you think of a field as like a row in an Excel sheet, or a field in a database, if you're a database developer, that's really what an agility field is. And so for a model is really just a collection of all those fields, and each of those fields have a different type. And choosing what type it is one of the challenges. So like maybe this is going to be a piece of text. So that's usually pretty easy. Is it a piece of text? But maybe it's a single line or a multi-line piece of text. Or maybe I want them to be limited about how long that text could be. And so each field has properties. So we can, and one of those properties of it, the most important one is which type it is. Is it a string, like a piece of text? Is it a date? Is it a number? But then we can also say, is it an image? And then is it a file? There are attachment types. I could also link content to other content. And so that's probably the most complex one, which we don't want to dive in too much into today. I'll show a diagram, a small diagram later, where we're showing how some content can be linked together, just as a visualization. But I think that choosing the type is really important, and it's usually obvious. And was it obvious to you, Brendan, when you joined Agility, to kind of look at that and make it make sense? I think it makes sense to people, right?
Totally. Once you actually get in there and like you look at the fields that are available, like they're so straightforward and kind of obvious that it's just about looking at a piece of content and then matching the fields that you think works the best. And there's always a little bit of room for creativity too, because the best content architectures think outside the blocks.
Oh, I like that. Nailed it. Yeah, the interesting thing is this is like the role of this person is often the architect. It's usually the solution architect, could be a developer. A lot of the times when folks are doing this, the person who's doing the work, we love that. Sometimes there's a customer and a partner that's implementing something. I love it when both the customer and the partner are involved in this collaboratively and have someone who's going to be on staff, hopefully forever, as part of this project that understands that, so that it's not just one team that decided on things. Because the hardest thing is naming that field and naming that type, that content model. That is the hardest thing, because if I have something called, maybe I'm building a piece of content and I have a list of products. Well, products is pretty easy. But what if I have 3 different kinds of products that are totally different from each other? What if we sell, like it could be that we sell products in store and we also sell tickets. What if we have multiple kinds of, a ticket is kind of a product, but maybe it should be in its own list. And so understanding and naming something can really help define how it is. And then there's a rule of thumb I have if you have more than like 15 or 20 fields on a thing, some things are really complicated, right? I have a list of, I'm selling maybe products. Products is a really good one. You might have 15 or 20 fields on a product that are specific to, how you define a product. But if you have 100 fields on your product, I'm going to guess that you probably have different kinds of products that might actually belong in different lists. And so it might behoove you to say, I have, products of this kind. So maybe I have tickets and I have like in-store products, or like maybe merchandise would be another thing. So I have tickets and merchandise. If you try to put those into one big master super list and call it products, then that's weird, right? It's not necessarily going to work well. So you can split things up. And in the architecture phase, in the modeling phase, that's when you can kind of diagram that out and bump those ideas off people and kind of see, hey, what do you think about this? And I think that's when we're onboarding folks, that's usually when this is done. And that's like a lot of discussion happens around that, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's important to, like you were saying, when you're thinking about content architecture, it's not just thinking about like what's going to make sense for right now and just like matching those fields, but it's also like, how can you make this future proof? How can I make it not too complicated? How can I build out the model to make it make sense to the end user who's actually using it? Putting in little descriptions, what fields are required. So there's all those little things to think about too, right? Right on.
Well, and required fields is a really important one, because that has effects on user experience in a huge way, because it means that if I'm filling out a product, and of course, the name of the product should probably be required, the SKU is probably required, but what if the price isn't required? Then I don't type anything in there, But if the code was assuming that there was going to be a price on there and it's not there, then you have to like handle that data that is like that. So a lot of the times when we're working with developers who are implementing content, we'll say, you got to really be think about how you can degrade gracefully if content all of a sudden isn't there. Because one thing that could happen is I set up the content model initially and I'll set a bunch of fields as required. But a marketer might come along or someone who's actually working with the content manager and say, you know what? I actually don't have the data for these fields. So I'll go into the model, change it, make it not required because I don't want to type out, gibberish in there. And all of a sudden I just created a breaking change in my model. So that's one of the things that can happen over time. So by future-proofing, sometimes we need to future-proof at the code level. So maybe we actually check for nulls on every field. It's a really good thing to do. It might be a little extreme, but that's a nice way to think about how we're going to actually work with these content models. So we've got our fields that have our types, they have their names, we've set these up. So in Agility, there's content models that are really meant to be for reusable structured content. And that's probably the biggest long-term value that you're going to find with an investment in content is building those structured types that in your organization. You have this content, it's usually there for the long term, and it's not something that's going to change when you get a new design. And the great thing about it is you can send this, it really has no connection to a front end. And that's really what true headless is about. I can build my content, it's in a structured way, and it's going to last the test of time. So we want to architect it and model it in a way that is very close to how you think about it in terms of its naming and how the types are represented and all that sort of stuff, so that it works with either the marketing team or whatever team is going to manage that content. And so that content is now available through an API that I could put in an app, I could put it on a website, I could syndicate it to some other thing, some other system could consume that content and do other things with it. All kinds of stuff. I could put it in an RSS feed. All kinds of things could happen, right? I think RSS feeds are coming back, by the way. I think it's going to be a big deal. I believe that in the future, this is just a little bit of an interesting drop. I believe in the future that like that structured content right now, like if I have a product listing, for instance, and I wanted to get that product listing into Google, I would have to put that product on a page and then Google will have to index that page. But remember RSS feeds where you could have or Atom feeds where you could actually have this list of pretty much structured data. If you think of a structured list of content as kind of like an RSS feed that's specific, that's a really good mental sort of visualization of that. And I believe that those kind of feeds are going to come back for AI because what better way to tell a search engine or an AI engine or an LLM about my content than like, here are all the fields in this content, as opposed to the AI LLM having to discern that from a page. But for now, most of that content has to get on a page somehow. It has to get out to a front end. And a lot of the times when we're modeling content, it is for a website, but it's really good to take ourselves out of that mindset when we're doing just the structured content to think about what structures we can represent. But then when we get into the visual aspects, we start thinking about component models. And then we start to think about, we start to look at our design system, and there should be a one-to-one mapping. And in an atomic design system, there's atoms, there's, I can't remember all the different ones, but like the really small, like a button, I don't want to really model a button. But a lot of times folks will use something like a hero component where maybe there's an image on the side with like a heading, some copy, and a call to action. I would say that is a good sort of, some people call that a banner. That's a good candidate for a component model. And just like you can often look at a design and pretty simply understand what are the aspects of that need to be modeled, right? With a hero, I've got the image field, I've got a heading field, a copy field, and a CTA field. Well, you might think, well, I don't know what CTA means. Isn't that a button? So you might want to label that button or link. Or maybe you have two links. So you call one primary link, one secondary link. This is where the nitty-gritty specifics come into it. And I think one of the biggest things to look at here is what is in the design. But sometimes people will do wireframes before the design. I love to see the wireframes because the wireframes will often have comments beside them that are the decisions that a information architect went through. Whoever is building wireframes should either be the same person or very closely collaborative with the content model, the person who's doing the content modeling. It often isn't. A lot of times folks will hire a design agency to build a design and then have a different agency actually do the development. And they're just consulting firms that just kind of work with you. I don't like that relationship to be disconnected from the customer too much. The customer, if you're getting this done, if you're looking at doing a new design, you want to have a very collaborative approach in terms of what the actual data is that's there, and really class. And Brendan, you've had experience with this too in onboarding when was trying to wrangle the different folks to make sure that we help that collaboration along, right?
Yeah, I think it's important to have, like you said, like a designer who's involved in those discussions, developer who's involved in those discussions, but also like a content strategist or a marketer, like somebody who's actually going to be creating the content. Because when you're building it, you're marketing or you're modeling it, you're coming up with your taxonomies and your naming conventions. It's important that, you know, it might make sense to you one way, but it also has to make sense to the person who's going to be filling out those fields out of agility when you're naming things.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have an architect person, a solution architect that's around. And a lot of that's a really common role that is missing in a lot of places. Is a good solution architect that actually has an architectural mind. But it kind of brings me to a thought of like, why would an architect bring a ladder to the bar?
Because he thought the jokes were on the house.
Drinks were on the house. You did it. Oh my gosh. No more in training. You are officially, you know, I think you can get the TM beside your name now if you wanted to.
Update it. Next time.
No, yeah, that's good.
I've graduated.
Yeah.
My dad jokes.
Okay. What?
Did I catch you off guard with that?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. All right. So, but when we're looking at components, right? That component content, there's a lot of headless systems that don't have the concept of a component because true pure headless doesn't have anything that's regarding the front end inside your content, right? Everything is like structured content. But if you're actually building a website, a lot of your content is meant to just be for a component. So it does behoove you to design like a hero component and to describe the fields that are on there. But sometimes folks, you need to take what's in your structured content. So maybe I have a product listing, maybe I have a report listing, maybe I have a blog listing, all these different kinds of things. You want to get that into a component. In agility, you use something called linked content to do that. So I can use linked content to do, you know, categorization of content and all kinds of other things like that. But one of the ways I can do it is to say, you know what, I'm going to build a featured product component, right? That looks just like my hero component, but it's designed specifically to put the fields of a product inside that hero component. And the nice thing is I don't have to go and fill in all those fields every time. I just go pick the component or pick the product on there. And then the developer does the work of like making it turn into the design that it needs to be. So there's a couple different ways that we can build components. Components could just have all their own content that is only meant to be, you know, only on this one time. It's kind of disposable content or very volatile content is another way we can think of it. But a lot of customers, so maybe if your website is about selling things and you sell products, a lot of times what they'll have is a list of offers. And they might have, you know, tons and tons of offers, but they display those offers in different ways. So I'm going to build offer hero components that will allow me to pick an offer and put it on there. And that's a great case for something like personalization. So when you're thinking of how I can personalize content, that is a really great terminology to think of. As maybe I've got some kind of hero banner or hero component that I have that's meant to show, it's meant to sell something, right? And it's meant to sell a particular product to a particular audience segment, right? So when I'm thinking of architecting my content, modeling my content, I should think about those segments in that. So if I have a list of offers, that's a great idea. So an offer might be for a particular product. So I'm going to link it to my product using a SKU, or maybe I'm going to actually create a hard link there. I'm going to probably give it some kind of audience segment. That is another piece of content that I would do. I'm getting into a much more complex scenario now, but this is how we can grow. You know, maybe we didn't do that initially, but you can add this stuff on top to then say, I'm going to have a personalized offer component that I add on. So we can layer things on top of these components to do that. So we've got our visual layer that comes from the design. And then we have the initial set of fields that comes from the idea of thinking of it as volatile content. So I encourage you to architect your components that way to give your marketing team easy ways to add them on there. But then your workflow might be more complex than that, where in order to get an offer on the homepage, you need to go create an offer or create a set of offers for different audiences potentially, and then link that to your offer hero component. So I would actually need a special component to do that. But that really gives a really clear workflow to the editors who are working on the site, because then they don't have any question about how they can use these components that are on there.
What's the balance, I guess, between like having a hero component and a hero offer component, and why not just like merging them together and having one component that could do both? Like at what point, I guess, do you like you're doing too much with a component and it's getting complicated?
So, and I've seen other systems. So there's actually other systems that work with other headless CMSs out there, like orchestration and other front-end sort of composable platforms that do that, where it allows so you pick your component and you are allowing to map, you have to manually map the fields from other content into there, which is to me like really, really flexible, but way too flexible. So I think that balance, that's a hard balance to strike, because what you're going to end up with is you'll have more components to choose from that might actually look similar. So I might have a whole bunch of hero components that are meant to link to different kinds of things. And I think that's okay, because to me, it's easier to ask a marketer to say, do I have a generic hero? So it's going to be like one-off volatile content. It's not linked to anything, right? Or do I have an offer hero? Do I have a product hero? Do I want to, or like, and I'll probably name them in a ways that make sense to what the lingo of my team is expecting. But that usually works out really well. What's hard is when you then bring new members onto the team and they have to learn the lingo for what all these things mean. Well, what's the featured offer hero mean? Well, and usually we like to have descriptions of each of these components. So anytime you model anything in agility, we don't make it required, but really should, is like you should have a minimum 200 like letter or character like description there that will sort of describe that to folks. We're going to be adding thumbnails in the near future to components. We don't have that right now, but we're going to be adding thumbnails in there so that when you're choosing your component, you can pick it visually. I think that'll really help with that too.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that goes through like content models and then component models and how they kind of link together. And I've got some simple diagrams I'll show in a second. But then the one that kind of gets left out and we don't talk about too much is page models. And there's a reason you don't talk about them very much, is you really usually don't need that many of them. And you can think of a page model more as like, what is the overall layout design of a page? And in a website, you usually don't have too many of them. Like I would say there's usually two. One is like you have a regular one where it's like I have a header and a footer and a place in the middle to put all my components, right? So we call that a zone. So really all you do is you define a page model with what's the name of the page model and what are the zones that are in there. Sometimes people will have like a 2-column layout where they have like a main panel for the sort of the big hero components, and then a side panel for like, I don't know, ads and stuff or whatever is going to show up on the side, other things that they're trying to do. So you might have a single column model and a 2-column model. So that's some sites have that. A lot of sites kind of bake that in now or whatever. And then you might have, what I've seen in a lot of sites is when you click on an ad in like, from Google search or something like that, it'll take you to like a landing page model where maybe you don't have a header or footer, or it's a different like trimmed down header or footer to kind of really center in on the content that was related to that ad. So sometimes people have a landing page template as well. So you might have 2 or 3. And then when the marketer is creating a page in Agility, they'll pick that model first. So am I creating a landing page? So again, the lingo of your team is really important there. A landing page needs to make sense versus a single column template or main template, something like that they can call that. So the templates and page models are kind of synonymous a little bit. You don't want to have a whole bunch of them though. And I think because other folks are used to like thinking from a design, I have a lot of different templates because of, well, a template, here's my product page template where it has all these things that are defining it, what are the product details. Really, you should think about that as a set of components, not a template, because really you have a header and a footer on every single page of your site pretty much, except for maybe a few pages. So it's like how you're laying out your components is more in line with how you should be thinking about that. Does that make sense? Brendan, am I making sense on that for what a page model is?
So the idea really is you only need an extra page model if it's a special page to like tell the front end how to render that page,
Yeah.
or as a way to like give the marketers a way to visualize where they're placing the content on the page.
Right on. Right on.
That makes sense.
Cool. So great question from Ben. Is a Markdown WYSIWYG editor a component field? So it could be. When I talk about text field types, there's actually a lot of kind of subtypes of there. So there's like a regular single line text field. You can do a multi-line text field. You can do a rich text field, which is to put HTML in there. And you can do a markdown field. So we have an app called Power Fields that brings a markdown editor into Agility. You can also do a block editor field, which saves it as JSON text. So all of those are possible. You could create a component that just has a markdown field in there. And that's really powerful because you can essentially like code the whole thing in Markdown for you if you wanted to. And that's usually for a developer, a very technical user, but not always. Some people are just really comfortable in writing. I like writing in Markdown. So what I've done is sometimes when I'm building an article or a blog post or any in our documentation site, we actually have the option of because you can set up what's called hide when formulas in Agility too. So you can have a drop down list that says, hey, is this a Markdown, rich text, or block editor article? And there's cases for all of them. And then you could hide and show the particular editor at that time to put in as part of another content model. So the field type, so Markdown field is a field type, just like rich text field or anything like that. And that can be used either in a content model or a component model. It's a great point. Or you could just create a component model that just has that in there. And we ship with every instance of Agility, there's a rich text model component that's there. And you can't get rid of it, which is weird. That is a weird one. And I think we'll probably change that at some point. So if you want to get rid of the rich text editor, then you don't want to use it. We'll probably ship that that change at the same time that we do a top level block editor, which is coming. So that's a little sneak peek. We've got 3 minutes left. Keep the questions coming. But Brendan, could you switch us to the screen view? I'm going to share a little bit of Figma here. So I do.
I don't know how that got there.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, no.
So cute. I can't think of anything else right now. But why did it put its head on the shelf? Anyway,
I don't know.
Anyway, that dog looks super comfortable. Okay. So this is Fig. I use FigJam diagrams to do it because it's really fast to type in. If anyone has some other tools that they love, they could throw those in the chat. Oh, got a question from Lewis. Some content authors would insist on pasting a block of HTML. What widget could we use for this? So that I would widget's another thing. So I would use a rich text field for that if they want to work with a block of HTML and they want to see what the HTML looks like. If it's just for pasting like a video embed from like YouTube or something like that, you probably want to use a long text field for those. So then you'll actually see what the iframe or script tag or something like that looks like. And I think another field that we probably should come up with, maybe we'll do this as a power field, is be a code field. I think that's something that we don't have explicitly yet. But if you want to just have code that's in there, raw HTML, you can use a long text field for that, or a rich text editor, or a markdown field. Actually, you could use any one of those things. Any of those fields will render that properly. Okay,
cool.
Looking at some diagrams here. So this is like if I was going to have only 4. This is very basic. Only 4 fields on my product. This is how I diagram it so that I don't have to do a ton of work before I can talk about what the things are named and whether the fields are required or not. I could put some more information on here, like, if I want to say that this is a text field, a linked category is probably going to be like linked content, something like that. Like I'll just put little hints in there. I don't have a formal system. I've done this over the years with Visio. I really like FigJam. A lot of people are using that because it actually exports really nicely to PDF. If I was doing a product content model, this is what I would do. Now, for a content model, this is something I didn't mention before that's really important, is that doesn't actually create a list. In Agility, I have to create what's called a container to create my products list based on that. So I'll often model that with a slightly different color. And then I can, it doesn't have to have, so all of every item in my products list will have the fields that are defined on the product model, right? So I can actually create multiple lists of products if they all have the same fields, but I wanted to put them in different lists. And then there's a lot of different use cases for that. I know for us on our documentation site, we actually split up our articles lists for we have editor articles, architect articles, and I think developer articles, and a few other ones for different SDKs. So we have a bunch of different articles lists. That works well for us. So in this case, I have, as I was saying before, this defines my products list and makes it available through the API, but it doesn't put it on a page. If I want to empower my marketers to be able to put a product on a page, I have to create a component that's linked to there. So what I can do is I can create a featured products component, and I'm doing this one in purple to say this is a component model now, and it's very similar. It has a heading. It has what I'm going to call content, or sometimes people call this copy. This is like long text field, right? So it's not required, but it can show up on there. So you've got like your heading, a little copy, and then I have something about like maybe I've got some featured like 3 products, like it'll show them in like card view or something, right? So we use what's called the search list box. Again, I'm getting more complicated than I should, but that's the products selector there. So that's how I would pick something from those products. It doesn't have to be as complicated as that though. It could be as simple as like a hero where I just have these three, as I talked about first, 3 fields on there. Super basic, really easy to set up. And then I might add something like a, image position to give someone a configuration. And this will be a drop-down list of left or right. So you can have a hero left or right. So now I don't have to have a left hero and a right hero. And I was having a great discussion the other day with Gina about like maybe a left hero and a right hero actually makes more sense for some folks. So it's a good question. Another question from Lewis. On my CMS console, rich text editor only shows the rendered block, but not the source. How can I enable HTML source? There is a little action. It looks like a little code.
Little view HTML code button.
Yeah, so you have to click view on there to see that. So if you're using that only for like embedded HTML, you might want to change that field type to long text if you never want to actually have it as a WYSIWYG, which isn't a very common case, but it does happen. So, and we can connect with you on that, Lewis. Reach out to us through Slack maybe or email. If someone wants to email us, Brendan, how can they do that?
support@agilitycms.com. But you can also just reach out to live chat through your little button. Right up your screen.
One other interesting sort of use case. I know we're a little over time. Thanks for staying with us, everybody. We've got tons of folks on this webinar. This is great. If I have something like an image carousel, this is a great idea of maybe I want to have an image carousel of products. Okay, so in that case, I would actually link this directly to my products list. And that would allow me to have a carousel of products, which is similar to my featured products. But maybe I want it to be a little more volatile, and I want to build it so anytime I put a carousel on a page, I have to manually update those carousel items so they're only in use on there. And a lot of marketers like this because that means I'm not going to get sort of Google SEO duplicate content problems. This carousel image would only be used on this carousel item. On this component itself. And so that's what we call nested content. So that's a little bit more advanced example from a hero where we have linked content and it's going to nest inside of there. And we could do a whole session, and we probably will, just on linked content. And I know that there's a lot on our documentation site about that. So if you have questions about linked content, happy to answer those through chat or support or whatever. And that's really all I wanted to show for diagramming. Obviously, diagrams can get a lot more complicated, and we'll do another webinar where we actually take a design and break it down to show all the different models that we could build from that design in a future-proof way. But this is a really basic head start, so I hope this was useful for folks.
For sure, and also a good segue. Like if you want to kind of like pick up from where we left off here on your own, you'll have the Academy, the new Academy course, like I said, coming out on Monday that goes over all of this in a little bit more detail, a little bit more examples, lets you do it at your own pace, and also allows you to get a certification at the end of it. And we'll have intermediate courses as well that come out over time.
Love it. Great job. That's shout out to you, Brendan, on that. So Brendan did pretty much all the work on that course. I know we talked about it a lot, about what was going to go into it. I'm super proud of that. And I can't wait to get folks certified on agility modeling.
Same. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in the next webinar.
See you folks. Take care.
Bye.